Hello, namaste, assalamu alaikum, welcome to Cricket for Us. And today we have loads to discuss. But let's start off first by introducing one of the most intellectual people on the face of the earth with regards to cricket specifically. It's Aaron, the cricket connoisseur. How you doing, man?
All good, Ashad, all good. I'm not sure about that intro, to be honest. I wouldn't describe myself as that, to be honest. I'd probably describe myself as just a cricket fan with far too much time on his hands watching, analysing, researching this wonderful game. But yeah, it's been a busy week, hasn't it? A very, very busy week indeed. We've got the Ashes coming up. I know that'll be a main focal point of tonight's conversation. We've had the India-New Zealand series as well. Sri Lanka versus West Indies. We've got the Lanka Premier League arriving on Sunday as well. The T10's going on. Like, there's an awful lot of cricket going on at the moment, but again, you can't complain. Best sport on the planet, and yeah, plenty to discuss for us too.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned some tournaments and series and formats that are going on around the world. Unfortunately, we won't be touching on those. We will be touching upon, though, is the thing that starts on Sunday. Ooh, what's that? I believe it's called the Ashes, which is known as one of the biggest, if not the biggest. You can fight me there. One
It's
of
the
the
biggest.
biggest. Yeah.
It's the
Ooh,
biggest.
right.
It's the
One of the
biggest.
rivalries in cricket.
It's the biggest. I'm sorry, when it comes to pure cricket, we're talking pure cricket. The first ever game between England and Australia was 1877. First ever Ashes series, 1882-83. This is a tremendous series. And I know that some people say it's over-exaggerated, it's overhyped. It really isn't. For people here in England and in Australia, this means the world. You have to win the Ashes. The fact is that urn is down under right now. They've retained it from 2019, having won it in 2017-18. We want our boys to get that urn back to its rightful home. So this isn't overhyped, it's not over-exaggeration, it's not hyperbole. The Ashes, from a cricketing perspective, and obviously in terms of population, in terms of external factors, India-Pakistan is up there as well. I mean, you get fantastic matches over the years in Test series, ODI matches, World Cup matches, etc., etc. But this is a cricketing rivalry born on the cricket field. This is a cricketing rivalry which has existed for 139 years. It means the world to us. So, in my opinion, it is the biggest. Again, that is just my opinion. I imagine a lot of England fans, Australia fans would say the exact same thing. But when the Ashes roll around, this is the thing with the Ashes which really entices you and it grips you as a cricket fan. You don't care about it, and you tell yourself up in your mind, I'm not going to be concerned about the Ashes this year. Okay, I'm not going to stay up. I'm not going to stay up all night and watch England get battered at the Gabba. And then once the Ashes arrive, you find yourself up at like 5:10 in the morning, having just spent 5 hours through the twilight hours of the night watching England versus Australia. It's that kind of series. You can't take your eyes off of it. If you miss 1 minute of it, it feels like you've missed an entire game. It's just that type of cricket. So it's incredibly engrossing. It really does capture the imagination of the general public. And honestly, I know there's a lot of factors with regards to the series, a lot of external stuff as well, which has happened before a ball's even been bowled. But the Ashes are the Ashes. Like, it is the pinnacle. If you are an England or an Australian Test cricketer, this is the one. This is the one. This is one of the biggest moments of your life, let alone your cricket career. We remember the teams that won the Ashes. Think 2005, okay? Think of the teams during the 80s, Botham's Ashes, for example. Think 2010-11, and we still herald those guys who lifted the urn down under a decade ago. This means more, and that is why the Ashes, in my opinion, are the biggest cricketing rivalry on the planet.
I love that. I love that intro. Honestly, couldn't have said it better myself, even though I disagree with you completely. But overall,
and
I'm
that's perfectly fine, by the way.
yeah,
Again,
yeah.
my opinion is not gospel. You don't have to treat it as such. But when it comes to cricketing rivalry, the Ashes, it's up there.
Yeah,
It really
100%.
is.
100%. I actually wanted to ask you, so it's about to begin, right? There's a loads of shows, Road to the Ashes, there's a lot surrounding this particular Ashes series. Before we get down into the nitty-gritty, I want to ask you something. What was your first Ashes moment?
For me, 2009. That was actually the first England match I ever watched. That's probably why the Ashes are so important to me. It was 2009, first game of the 2009 Ashes. And I think everybody knows the moment I'm going to say, but it was the last wicket stand between Jimmy Anderson and Monty Panesar in Cardiff. And that, to me, I mean, you couldn't have got a better game to really kickstart a love of English cricket. It was remarkable for someone who can't bat to watch Jimmy Anderson and Monty Panesar defend, defend, defend. Peter Siddle trying his absolute best. I mean, he had about 4 or 5 shouts in that final hour of LBWs and near misses. It was brilliant theatre. It hooked me. It got me gripped on the Ashes fever, the Ashes excitement, and just from that one session, that ignited my love of international cricket. So 2009, that was my first one. I can't say 2005. I wish I could. I wish I could turn around as Jazz and say it was Edgbaston 2005 when Simon Jones took that catch off Michael Kasperowicz of the bowling of Steve Harmison, but it wasn't. I'd be lying to not only myself but to everyone out there. So 2009 Ashes, what a moment it was. What a series that was. And yeah, from there, look where we are today, 2021-22, on the eve of yet another Ashes series, and just as excited as I was, as an 8-year-old.
That's amazing, honestly. The thing with the Ashes, again, I got to bring this back. The way Australia and England treat the Ashes, it's amazing. Like, even in the World Cup, you don't see as much theatre in cricket in England, at least, right? As you see just before the Ashes, and there's loads of talks. Like I said before, there's a lot going on, and I don't want to touch upon it too much. But let's talk about the most important aspect from an England perspective is the fact that Ben Stokes is back, right? And he looks pretty good. I saw some of the
Yeah.
net sessions on the ECB website and stuff. So, what are your thoughts on Ben Stokes coming back? England not particularly having, no offense to Jack Leach, a spinner of the caliber of someone like Nathan Lyon, or if you go further back in the English history, no one like Monty Panesar or Graham Swan, etc. So, what do you think? Who do you think will be the key aspect for England in this Ashes?
This might surprise people, but I have got 3 names, and none of them include the names of Joe Root or Ben Stokes. As big as those guys will be, Joe Root is having the year of his career. 2021 really has been the year of Joe Root, as both the leader and as the batsman. He's been absolutely remarkable. Ben Stokes as well will be massive. I'm not doubting that for 1 second. I mean, this guy, when he walks out onto that field, he's got a good record against Australia. And you just know, even though those players may not be, feeling it in the moment, in the back of their heads, they will remember 2019. They know what Ben Stokes is capable of doing to this Australian attack. So, Ben Stokes, massive morale boost, one of the best all-rounders on the planet right now, up there with the likes of Jason Holder and Ravindra Jadeja. So, massive, massive boost for England to have him back. But in terms of my 3 choices, you've mentioned one of them there, and that is Jack Leach. Now, if we think back to 2017, 2018, and in that series, England bowlers didn't exactly have the greatest of times out. Okay, I think our leading bowler was Jimmy Anderson with 17 wickets. Now, 3 Aussie seamers took over 20. Mitchell Starc, Josh Hazlewood, Pat Cummins all got over 20 wickets in that series. But something which I think went unnoticed and under the radar was Moeen Ali's performance. His bowling average was 115. 115 with the ball, that is, not the bat, with the ball. And we were just leaking runs with the spin. Spin in Australia, I think, is a really underappreciated art form because it's where you can control the narrative of a match. This is what Nathan Lyon has done so brilliantly for so many years. And in fact, it wasn't really recently concluded, but in the last Border Gavaskar Trophy series, we saw that with Washington Sundar and Ravichandran Ashwin. Spin is so vital in Australia, not in terms of taking wickets, but producing control, taking control, tightening that metaphorical vice on the opposition and not leaking runs and creating pressure when you're rotating your seamers in the intense heat of the Australian sun. So for me, Jack Leach is absolutely imperative. What we lacked in 2017, 2018 was control from that other end when the seam bowlers were taking a bit of a rest. 2021, we will require Jack Leach to bowl a lot of overs, and it will be up to him to match, if not surpass, Nathan Lyon, which is a tremendously difficult feat, something which Ashwin did, but this will be a massive litmus test for Jack Leach. And I also think Jitan Patel, to be honest, as England's spin coach, because he's done a lot of work with him, and Jitan is a legend here.
Yeah.
In the Midlands, I've got absolute confidence in him to get the best out of Jack Leach. But let me just tell you, spin bowling in Australia, it doesn't get the headlines, but it can change a match. And that is something that England have to appreciate. We can't just give the ball to Joe Root. Joe Root is not a frontline spinner. He can give you a couple of overs if you're getting a bit desperate, or if Australia, that lead's increasing, and you're trying something different. But Jack Leach, you have to trust him. He has not bowled a lot in 2021, other than the India series, and, a little bit in the summer as well for Somerset. But his contribution will be absolutely vital to match Nathan Lyon. And then aside from the bowling, something which England simply didn't do in the last Ashes, and you can argue 2019 and 2017-18, is score runs. That's how you win test matches in Australia. For the most part, this isn't England. It's not got a Duke's ball. There isn't that little bit more seam-conducive nature in the surface. These wickets in Australia, for the most part, aside from maybe the SCG, are relatively flat. You can get in. If you get in, it's no good scoring 40, 50 runs. You have to score 100. In the last Ashes, in 2017-18, Stephen Peter Devereux Smith, there we go. I always get those in the wrong order, but Steve Smith, basically. I should have just said Steve Smith, to be honest. But Steve Smith averaged well over 100 in that series. He averaged 137. And that was because he would get to 50 and he would convert. Compare that to the English batsmen. Not a single one of our batsmen averaged over 50. Joe Root was the highest scoring in terms of the average, with an average of 47. So for me, the other two key protagonists from an English perspective are Rory Burns and Haseeb Hameed, because the way you win matches in Australia is building from the top down. You have to have a solid foundation. I think all the way back to 2010-11, what did England have at the top? Andrew Strauss, Sir Alistair Cook. Those two bossed, dominated, put Australia on the back foot right from day one of that series. They were absolutely remarkable. In Australia, where you do have these opportunities to cash in, get proper big scores, Rory Burns and Haseeb Hameed will be absolutely integral. England need runs to win this series. We've got the bowlers. We've got Mark Wood. We've got Stuart Broad, Jimmy Anderson, Ollie Robinson, Chris Wokes, Craig Overton. They are capable bowlers. They can win games for England with the ball in hand. But it's no good giving those guys 250, 300 runs. That would suit you well in England. In Australia, you need 400, 450. You need that, that's, I suppose, that sense of comfort when it comes to those run chases, because they are flatter wickets. So for me personally, of those two, of Haseeb Hameed and Rory Burns, I think the onus, the emphasis lies on Rory Burns. He is the more experienced one. He's played a lot more test matches. He's done all right at times in 2021. I mean, he had that excellent knock against New Zealand, didn't he, early in the summer, but he needs to step up to the plate now. This is his series. This is his moment to really grab that opening spot by the scruff of the neck and say, I am England's number one opening batsman. So Haseeb Hameed, Rory Burns, Jack Leach, if those guys come to the forefront, because I have no doubt the likes of Joe Root, Ben Stokes, Jimmy Anderson, Stuart Broad, those guys will perform anyway. If those three guys, along with the rest of the unit, can really combine and produce some special batting and bowling performances, England could produce some surprises in this series, shall we say, Asjad?
Dude, sorry, I was so engrossed in what you were saying, I completely forgot we were recording. Um, Aaron, one thing you said about England there is the last time they didn't score many runs. 400, 450 is not a minimum, but it's at least what they should be aiming for when they go out to bat in every single game in Australia in this Ashes. So my question is, if we look at the opposite end, we look at Australia, okay? They have the likes of David Warner, Steve Smith, Marnus Labuschagne, but after number 4, they're also not as potent or as strong as previous teams of Australia have been. So who do you think could be the 3 players from an Australian perspective, if obviously you take players like Steve Smith out of it and, Nathan Lyon?
Well, it's an interesting one. I think one of the most underappreciated members of that Australian team is Travis Head. I'm going to be honest, I know some people don't really want him in the 11, but I think that number 5 spot really quite suits him well. He's a very gritty, kind of character. He's a bit of a warrior in that middle order. And one of these matches is at his home ground. It's the day-night match at the Adelaide Oval, which is where he plays his domestic cricket for South Australia. So Travis Head, for me, as you said, if some of those top order guys do fail to fire, the likes of Warner, Marcus Harris, because Kawaja's not playing, which I think is a blessing in disguise for England. To be completely honest, I
Yeah.
would rather have Marcus Harris than Kawaja, although both are excellent batsmen. But
Mhm.
Kawaja's the kind of batsman you don't want to face in an Ashes series, especially if he gets in, because he can score 100s and 150s for fun, basically. But if the likes of those two, Steve Smith on the odd chance you get him out for less than 50, okay, and Marnus Labuschagne as well. If you can get through these guys, Travis Head is basically the guardian to the Australian middle to lower order. It is absolutely vital that Travis Head scores runs in this series, because if he doesn't, look who's below him. You got Cam Green, who I think has, I think, an immense ceiling. I really do. I rate this guy incredibly highly. For those who don't know him, watch him for Western Australia. Watch him in previous Test matches as well. The guy's got an incredible future ahead of him. But the key there, ahead of him, not right now. He's inexperienced. Okay, this is his first ever Ashes series, and they haven't been playing Test matches all year. So this is a tremendous test in more ways than one. In addition to that, no Tim Payne. And I know Tim Payne doesn't score centuries, but you've got Alex Carey. Alex Carey making his Test debut in the Ashes.
Yeah.
There's going to be the weight of the world on his shoulders. So Travis Head, it's remarkable. He has to score runs in this series. If he does, that will frustrate England very, very much so. So Travis Head, for me, definitely one of the key protagonists from an Australian perspective. I will throw Marcus Harris as well. I think I have to say so, because he was excellent for Leicestershire this year in county cricket. Really was an absolute tour de force, batting at number 3 at Grace Road, which is a bit more of a flat track, maybe a bit more reminiscent of the Aussie tracks themselves. But if he scores runs, that top order can win games for Australia. So Marcus Harris, he'll be my second choice. In terms of third one, I am going to go for someone a bit more cliche, but Pat Cummins. And Pat Cummins, not just for the seam bowling, but the captaincy.
Yeah.
This is his first series as Australia's Test captain. What an honour, a privilege that is, to call yourself the Australian Test captain. This series is massive for him. This could be the make or break of his early captaincy. And that isn't even being hyperbolic in any shape or form, because if you look at Tim Payne's early career, he got off to a decent start. As soon as he lost that Border Gavaskar Trophy series, the media were hounding him
Yeah.
in Australia. If these guys lose the Ashes urn to an England side, which, well, if you believe the media, is weaker than this Australian outfit, that's going to be pretty embarrassing for the Australian cricket team, and there's going to be a lot of questions to answer. So Pat Cummins, this is a real test of his bowling, but also of his captaincy. So this is a massive series for him as well. There'll be pressure on his shoulders, which he won't have experienced before in the international arena. If things start going south, he won't have the experience that Joe Root does have to kind of, build off of, per se. So those are the three I'm going to choose for Australia. Travis Head, Marcus Harris, Pat Cummins. Again, the exact same logic. If those guys fire, Australia, yeah, they probably do have the firepower, to be honest, to win this series quite comfortably.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm not surprised by the Travis Head or Pat Cummins comment. I'm actually very surprised by Marcus Harris. Don't you think? And again, we can talk about Usman Kawaja or Harris, right? Or Head, depending on some other people talking about, Kawaja can just fit in at number 5 because you don't need Head in the side. How do you see that decision? How do you think
Not 5.
Kawaja will get a chance? Will get a chance in this Ashes series?
The only way I can see Usman coming in is opening the batting, and it's something which he's tried to do for Queensland. And to be honest, this year Queensland, for the most part, have struggled with the bats. There's
Apart
one
from him.
person who is, yeah, exactly. There's one person who is by far and above every other batsman in that Queensland batting lineup, and it's Usman Kawaja, and he's been batting in the top 3. Kawaja can open the batting. I've seen him do it before. So if you are going to open with him, if Marcus Harris is struggling against the likes of Broad Anderson, who had his number in 2019, again in albeit different conditions, but again, it does play on the mind when things get tough in a series. That's where I see Kawaja potentially coming in. But if I'm putting my very, very biased England hat on, I don't want to see Usman Kawaja in this series because he is the exact kind of batsman that will frustrate the living daylights out of England. That's just what he's like because he grafts, he grinds away runs, not to the same extent as a Dom Sibley or a Cheteshwar Pujara, but he really is a battler. He's a
Yep.
fighter at the top of the innings. If you start, throwing down short balls with him, he's gonna start pulling you. He's gonna, he's not gonna back down. He's not gonna relent. He's gonna fight fire with fire. So Usman Kawaja, if he is to come into this series, which he might do, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But I wouldn't put him at 5. That's far too low for a batsman of his caliber. If you're going to bring him in, injuries aside, number 2, have him alongside David Warner.
One thing you mentioned about Pat Cummins, and you kind of touched upon most of what I wanted to speak to you about, but I'll just raise one point. It is his first captaincy stint for Australia as a test captain, that too in an Ashes series. Do you think he might get a bit overwhelmed with the situation? Yes, people are saying, of course, he's been playing for years. He knows how to handle pressure, etc., etc. But what do you think? Do you think Pat Cummins could get into a situation that could be detrimental for him and his actual performance rather than, a lot of captains, and you might remember, you might know of this, that there have been a lot of really good players, exceptional players, but they aren't able to perform as well when they become captain.
Yep.
So how do you think he'll tackle that?
I'm glad you brought that up. I think of 3 players immediately off the top of my mind. Kevin Peterson for England, Quinton de Kock for South Africa, and this is a county example, but Ricky Clark for Derbyshire. And it's very interesting you say that. Just because you're the best player doesn't necessarily mean you're the best captain.
Yeah.
In this scenario, though, I must admit Pat Cummins does have leadership qualities. So I think he is the right option. And I put this up on my Instagram, actually, that I would have chosen him. I think he's the right man to lead Australia in this series. The key thing there, though, is there is a massive difference. And this is at my level, bear in mind. Okay, very, very low level village. And I can tell you from experience, there is a difference between simply being part of a team and leading a team, especially when times get tough. That is the making of a captain. If Australia go 1-0 down in this series, what will Pat Cummins do? No one knows the answer to that, of course. Okay, that might not even happen because looking at the weather, looks like the first test might be rained off actually in Brisbane, which will be a shame. But, you can't really control that. But adversity, that is what characterises good captains. We don't really think of MS Dhoni or Owen Morgan or Kane Williamson or Graham Smith for the series or the games where the teams walked it. We think of them and we remember them for the situations where the going got tough and the pressure started getting a bit too much for us as mere mortals. A good solid captain remains ice cool in the heat of battle. Think Owen Morgan in the 2019 World Cup final. Absolutely perfect example. Jofra Archer in his first ever major tournament for England, you get the super over because I have absolute faith and confidence in your ability. And that is what Pat Cummins has to do. He has to show that same faith in his bowlers, who he's been playing with for years, as well as Cam Green. And I think that'll be an interesting nuance, a little narrative actually in this series. How will Australia trust Cam Green if he does start going for runs? Because he is your change bowler at the end of the day from the 3 speed demons. So that'll be another, little interesting side story to watch out for. But with Pat Cummins, he's got the leadership qualities. No doubt about that. He hasn't got experience. So if England can put Australia on the back foot, and this will be a theme that I'll come back to again and again and again in this Ashes, I want England to be aggressive. I want England to be proactive. I want England to take the attack to the Australians because we didn't in the last 2 Ashes series. And we were punished rightly as a result of that. So in this series, attack Pat Cummins, attack the Aussies with pretty much everything you've got. And who knows, if England do take a lead, you're putting the pressure on to a very, very inexperienced captain. And we'll have to wait and see how and if he does deal with it.
Yeah, that's going to be something that no one ever wants to be. That's a position no one ever wants to be in, and if Pat Cummins comes under that pressure, then we'll have to see how that goes. But no, thank you, Aaron. There's a question from one of our subscribers, right? And I'm going to call this segment #AskC4UXTCCP or something like that. That's what I just come up with. So the question is, how does England get Steve Smith out?
That is a very, very good question, Asjad. Who asked that, by the way?
It's Aryan, and actually, there's two people. There's Soham and Aryan. Both of them asked that question.
Well, I'm glad that they did, because I have got my own theories, and some people may disagree with them. But let me just take you back to 2017-18 first, okay? In that England versus Australia Ashes series, Steve Smith averaged 137. In 2019, he averaged 110 in England and Wales. There is one anomaly in Steve Smith's batting, though, in recent years, and that is the Trans-Tasman Trophy against New Zealand. This was in Australia, by the way. He averaged 42 with the bat, which doesn't sound bad, but compared to those other series, it is a markable decrease. Now, Ajad, do you remember that series? Do you remember what New Zealand did to Steve Smith to almost put him off, per se?
I'd say just ball short balls if I'm not wrong, but you can correct me if I am.
Well, they did. Neil Wagner
Yeah.
absolutely attacked him with a barrage of short deliveries. Now, I imagine England will have that in the back of their mind with Mark Wood at their disposal. Ollie Robinson, he's got a pretty mean bouncer as well. Stuart Broad, I imagine he'll want to throw some down, to be honest, as well, to try and get some wickets on these pitches as well. But for me personally, that is one thing you do with Steve Smith. The one thing that England can't afford to do is give Steve Smith respect. And it's something that we did in 2017. It's something which we did again in 2019. And in fact, when I think of the best batsmen in the world, we've done this in previous series. We did it against Kane Williamson. He averaged well over 50. We did it against Kohli in 2018. We've done it against Babar Azam. We give these guys respect to the point where we just accept that they're going to score runs, that they're going to score 50 or 100. In Australia, you can't do that. You have to actively go fighting for these wickets. You have to fight fire with fire. And something which I've discussed in the past, actually, with regards to Steve Smith and trying to get his wicket, is being proactive. Now, I think back to 2020, this was England versus South Africa, second test at Newlands. England were 1-0 down in the series, and it was day 5. And Rassie van der Dusen was frustrating England, just digging in, really slow strike rate, just trying to bat out for a draw for the Proteas. Out of nowhere, Jimmy Anderson, Stuart Broad, Joe Root convene in the middle. They have a chat. Stuart Broad gets given the ball. Joe Root organises the field. And the key thing here, the vital difference, he puts Jimmy Anderson at leg slip. So what happens in this very over when England do that? Stuart Broad he goes outside off, and then he straightens one. Rassie van der Dusen falls for the baits, little clip off the legs, straight to Jimmy Anderson. England then go and take the rest of the wickets and win the test match. Against someone like Steve Smith, you're not going to get him out conventionally 9 times out of 10 because he's too good as a batsman. What you have to do is get up in his face. You have to make him uncomfortable. Surround him. Not to the point where you're putting in, like silly mid on, silly mid off, because I wouldn't want to be in that position against Steve Smith, especially when he's driving.
Yeah.
But the fact is, you have to make this guy uncomfortable. You have to make him earn those runs. Don't just put men out in the deep and allow him to, milk these quick 1s, quick 2s, quick 3s. Really make him work for his runs. Be intimidating. Be aggressive. Get inside his mind if you can. I know that's incredibly hard to do. It's a lot easier for me to say, sat on a couch in Warwickshire. I'm not out there in the middle, battling for the Ashes urn. But with players of these calibers, you have to take the attack to them. You can't give them that respect. It's something which England have done so often. And again, it's not a case of, being ridiculous and getting all personal and start, incessant sledging them. I'm not on about the mind games. I'm on about the cricket. I'm in terms of field placement, being proactive. Something like a leg slip or a leg gully. Put someone in at short leg and start bowling short at him. Just do something different. Okay, pack the slip cordon. Be aggressive. If Steve Smith, let me be completely honest right now, Steve Smith, if you're going to go in with the attitude of he's going to score runs, he's going to go big. It's as simple as that. If you're going to say, oh, he's going to get a 50 anyway, he's going to go and score 100 because he's that kind of batsman. You have to be attacking. Go for him. Absolutely gun for him. Throw everything at him because he is the vital key. He is the cog that holds that Australian batting lineup together. Okay, he's destroyed England in the last couple of Ashes series. You think if England get him out early, okay, and I'm not talking about for a duck, but even about 20 runs, the morale boost that gives England is massive. And watching Steve Smith trudge off for a low score will be a killer blow for an Australian team which does have a weak underbelly in the middle order. So my advice for England, go out there, be aggressive, be proactive, and, show some ingenuity. Don't just be, all conservative and safe with your field placements. Do something different. If it doesn't pay off, what have you got to lose? With the greatest of respect, these are good batting pitches in Australia, but you have to make things happen. This isn't England. The Kookaburra ball is not the same as the Duke ball. The overcast conditions from La Nina, I'm not sure if we're going to discuss that actually, Ashchad, at some point, but that may actually play into England's hand in this series with the swing element. But if that doesn't come into as much of a factor, you're going to have to work so hard for these wickets. So my advice for England, go out there, aggressive, attack them, show intent, show some ingenuity, and be proactive. And if we can do that, who knows? We could turn the series on its head quite early on.
That's a fantastic answer to a very good question. Thank you for the questions. And thank you for answering very well, Aaron. So just before we leave, just before we end this particular show, I want to ask you a very pertinent question. It's a question that, no one ever asks you, Aaron. Who's going to win the Ashes?
Well, it's funny you say that, because 2021, with my predictions, hasn't been ridiculously kind. So for one final time, one last hurrah in 2021, hopefully my bad luck streak continues in the predicting arena. 5-0 Australia. Australia will definitely win the Ashes. And I say that with 100% conviction, and definitely don't want England to win. But at the end of the day, no, I mean, look, if it goes as well as my IPL predictions, I'll definitely be a happy bunny here in England. Let me just tell you that right now. I'll say 5-0 Australia. Oh no, and if I'm proven wrong, it won't be a case of, oh, that's a crushing blow. It'll be, thank goodness for that, I've been proven wrong. So prove me wrong, cricketing gods. England, prove me wrong. But 5-0 Australia, it's definitely going to happen, Asjad. That's my prediction. My concrete prediction that's definitely going to happen.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I do. You mentioned you were going to do this before. I was like, no, he's not really going to do it. But thank you. I appreciate that. My personal prediction is I think it was 3-1 Australia, because I just assumed one of them would be a draw or get rained off, depending on, or the weather comes into play in some sort of way. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Aaron. Really appreciate your time. For everyone watching, please do like, share, and subscribe. Do go over to the Cricket Connoisseur on every single platform you possibly can. Also, check out the County Cricket Podcast. He's done like 5 shows this week, and he's going to keep doing them over and over again, but with new people and different type of conversations on his podcast, the County Cricket Podcast, throughout the Ashes. So please do check him out. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much. Until next time, take care.